And I'm going to be calling the Concord Select Board meeting for October 16th, 2017 to order. Jane Hotchkiss, the chair of the committee, is unavailable tonight due to a family health issue. And so the first order of business is going to be to elect a chair pro tem.
I move to appoint Tom McCann Chair Pro Tem.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the second is to elect a clerk pro tem.
I move to appoint Alice Kaufman Clerk Pro Tem.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We move to now the consent agenda, the town accountant warrants, gift acceptance, Middlesex School, $50,000 to the police communication equipment gift account. Belinda Smith, $500 to the Beatty Center donation gift account. Frederick Lovejoy, $500 to the Beatty Center donation gift account. And Charles Clogg, $500 to the Beatty Center donations gift account. Thank all of them very much, very appreciated. One-day special licenses, the Salt Box Farm, November 16th from 4:30 to 7:30 p.m., 40 Westward Road, Wine and Malt. Salt Box Farm, November 30th, 4 to 8 p.m., 40 Westford Road, Wine and Malt. And Salt Box Farm, December 14th, 4:30 to 8:30 p.m., 40 Westwood Road, Wine and Malt. Concord Women's Chorus, December 16th, 5 to 6 p.m., 81 Elm Street, wine only. Extension of hours, Salt Box Kitchen, November 4th, 10:30 p.m., last call 10 p.m., 84 Commonwealth Avenue. And Sunday entertainment licenses, the Concord Players, November the 12th, 2017, 1 to 6 p.m. These are all at 51 Walden Street, the theater. Also, February 18th, 2018, 1 to 6 p.m. April 29th, 2018, 1 to 6 p.m. And May 6th, 2018, 1 to 6 p.m., all at 51 Walden Street, the theater.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now move to the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This coming Saturday will be a busy day in Concord. At 11 a.m., there's an open house at the new bus facility on Knox Trail, and a description of the solar activity that's at that same location. From 11 to 1, refreshments will be served at the new bus facility on Knox Trail. Also on Saturday is Discover West Concord Day, encouraging folks to shop locally and support our local retailers. That's from 10 to 4 on Saturday, October 21st. And then finally, the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee is holding an Envision Concord workshop at the high school from 9:30 till noon, I think it is. And they're encouraging the public to participate. So lots to do on Saturday. On November 15th, we have scheduled that hearing on parking regulations. That's a Wednesday, it's at 7 o'clock in the hearing room of the townhouse. Some people called to ask if it had been scheduled. We'll get notices in the paper and on social media. The Public Works Commission will have a public shade tree inventory discussion on Wednesday, October 18th. We've counted all of the public shade trees, evaluated their condition, and identified locations where new trees or trees that have been removed in the past could be replaced. So that could be an interesting discussion. Reminder that the Rideout field improvement dedication of the new Rideout playground area is Thursday, October 26th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The Emerson Umbrella the Umbrella Center for the Arts received the ZBA approval last Thursday for their requested special permit following favorable comments from the planning board. So that project is ready to move forward. The drop-off, swap-off event last Saturday was very successful, 987 cars, so almost 1,000, close to a record. Church Street was paved last Saturday, binder course, and the finish course will be done a week from Monday on the 23rd after the West Concord Day on Saturday. The toy shop property at 53 Main Street has a sprinkler system for the first time. The fire chief says it's operational. He can sleep better at night as a result of that. And let me see, lastly, there'll be a scheduled power outage in the Emerson Field neighborhood as part of the undergrounding program that's been going on for several years. 64 customers will be affected, and that will take allow them to take the power lines off the poles and use the underground utilities. And that's all I have to report.
We didn't get our Black Hawk helicopter.
It didn't come because of bad weather after all that. That's too bad. But apparently they had a nice fundraiser. It was very successful.
Questions or comments? Thank you. We're ready for public hearing, poll petition Comcast of Massachusetts, 3rd, 22 Concord Turnpike.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. If you would identify yourself for the record and make sure you speak up so that people behind you can even hear, because this doesn't amplify, it only records.
Understood. Thank you very much. I'm Greg Franks on behalf of Comcast, and I'm here in support of our petition for a grant of location to attach wires to utility pole 61 through 63 on Cambridge Turnpike in order to serve a customer at 22 Concord Turnpike. My understanding is a walkthrough has occurred between Comcast representative and the engineering department. I have had a chance to review the proposed conditions of the order, which are the standard conditions that we're accustomed to, and we have no objection. I also understand that the town has a project to place utilities underground, and I'll be sure to pass that along to the appropriate people at the company. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
We do have a memo from Rich Rain, sort of indicating their understanding of this, so.
Anybody else?
No questions from me.
Thank you. Anybody in the public would like to comment?
I move to close the
Ready
public
then
hearing
to-
now.
Second. Motion to close the hearing.
I move
Second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to grant permission to install overhead coaxial cable to be owned by Comcast of Massachusetts 3 Incorporated, as requested in the petition plan marked aerial cable placement request utility pole 61, Cambridge Turnpike to pole 63, Cambridge Turnpike, and as noted in the order dated October 16, 2017.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. Now move to our next public hearing, a change of manager, Trails Inn Cafe, 97 Lowell Road. A motion to open,
I move to open the hearing.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You would identify yourself and give us a brief overview.
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Jim White. I am one of the owners of Trails End Cafe. This is Manny Rodriguez, who we've requested that you approve as our new manager because our old manager has left. Manny, as you can see, has been working in Concord for the better part of 10 years. He was manager at Concord Provisions from 2008 to 2016. He's been with us now for quite a while. And we think he's highly qualified and hope you approve him.
I note that we have had a report from the police department personnel that everything clears and looks fine, so just for the record, that's good news.
Yeah, and I'm
Any
impressed
questions?
with the credentials.
Oh, thank you.
Not only working at Trails End, but also at Provisions, and before that at Whole Foods.
Yeah,
It's a lot of good experience, so we're
thank you.
nice to have you in town.
Thank you.
So are we.
An asset for you too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of also meeting Mr. Rodriguez when he's been in action at Trails End, and I find him responsible and would be a great person to have.
Any public want to make a comment? Motion to,
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to approve Manuel G. Rodriguez as manager of record for Trails End Cafe LLC, doing business as Trails End Cafe located at 97 Lowell Road. The manager must be engaged in the actual management of the licensed premises as his main occupation and must be present on the licensed premises for not less than 30 hours per week during the hours when alcoholic beverages are sold, contingent upon ABCC approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
You.
I think our timing seems to be working fairly well. We now are ready for the 7:10 public hearing, transfer of all alcoholic beverage license and new common particular license, ML Restaurant Group, Inc., doing business as Michael's Restaurant, to Concord Brewery 2, Inc., doing business as Rapscallion at 208 Fitchburg Turnpike.
I move to open the public hearing.
Second?
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
There has been a request that this matter be continued until October 30th meeting. I don't know if the public has any comments to make. Seeing none,
So I move to continue the public hearing to October 30th, 2017 at 7:10 PM.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Now we are ready for item number 7, the Crosstown Connect Regional Transportation Collaborative, IMA. Alice, do you want? Marcy, good to see you.
Good evening. Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management, here this evening to request your vote to sign an intermunicipal agreement for Crosstown Connect, which is a transportation management services group, and authorize the town manager to apply for membership in that organization. You have before you a memo that I prepared providing background information. This discussion began back in 2009 with the town of Acton, the town of Boxborough, and Concord, and then grew over time. In 2012, the governor's office funded a collaboration of Acton, Boxborough, Littleton, Maynard, Stowe, and Clock Tower Place to implement a community innovation challenge grant and begin discussions. And then in 2013, they formed a regional transportation management association. It's made up of public and private enterprises. Concord has not been able to participate because of our relationship with the MBTA, and we have 2 commuter rail stations. But if Concord were to tap into funds from the MBTA, residents would lose access to the ride, which I believe provides a lot of service to people who are disabled or older. So I didn't want to jeopardize that. In 2000, just last year, in the budget, the town manager authorized $7,500 toward this endeavor, and that would be the source of the funds for our initial membership in Crosstown Connect. My hope had been that we would have a van available that we could use part-time, but I don't know, that I think is still in the works, perhaps. And then we would become more of a participant and begin to look at dispatch services as well. So it provides, I think the offering of Crosstown Connect provides focus and helps the community expand consciousness regarding traffic, transportation, and related matters among residents as well as business sector, provides leadership in combining area resources to maximize mobility between neighboring communities, could coordinate transportation resources. I know Emerson Hospital and our medical services are destinations for many of the residents in the communities that participate in Crosstown Connect. So becoming an active member, I think, would benefit the community in continuing that conversation. I've learned recently that Open Table has relocated some of their services over to Maynard, and so Concord residents are having some issues in getting over to Maynard, and this might be a way to open that communication about getting people to Maynard. So, questions?
So how, so with this year, how is the MBTA funding, like, how is that different from the years past?
The town continues to pay, and I don't know the technical term for it.
Assessment.
An assessment to the MBTA. I think our assessment is up to close to $400,000. And so in the other communities, because we're all at the edges of various regional transit agencies, Lowell Regional Transit Authority and the Montechusett Regional Transit Authority have been willing to provide either vans or other services or funding for the communities to participate and to expand the offerings. I have not begun that conversation with the MBTA because, again, as I said, I don't want to jeopardize that ride service. But that might be something that we explore down the road.
So is this the same problem that Acton faces? Because they're the next stop past Concord.
No, Acton has a different assessment. They have a much lesser assessment, and they're part of the Lowell Regional Transit Authority. So their residents do not have access to the ride. If their residents are able to get to Emerson Hospital, they can then use it, but they have to get into Concord before they can take advantage of that.
I was wondering why I had known that they had something that we didn't have. Lower rates, but
Provides them with funds, too.
yeah.
That's correct. They have the Roadrunner service as well as their local Minute Van. The discussions that we had back in 2009 was the impetus to create the Minute Van, and they have a very robust, they are able to use their Council on Aging vans in delivering commuters to the train stations and then being available for participants in the Council on Aging, and then being available at the end of the school day to get children from point A to point B. Sometimes it's to jobs, sometimes it's to community locations and so forth.
I have two. Would Uber be cheaper? I have two questions. The first one is, it's $7,500 now. Do we anticipate or know what it might require in the future?
Actually, it would only be $5,500 to begin with. As we begin our membership application process and talk to the group about the resources that might be available, we may contract for additional services.
And you mentioned Lowell. It's come up in conversations with the business community a number of times about some kind of transportational connection between Lowell and Concord. Is that something that could be engaged in under?
It's part of the conversation. I think with the advantage of the Crosstown Connect is they have established a good track record at working with various state and federal agencies to expand the way they look at things. They were able to they were part of the group that got the reverse commute coming out from Boston to Littleton and Westford. Westford is very interested in that commute from Lowell, from Haverhill. And we're having conversations where we do things slowly and incrementally so that we understand there are always pet tests or pilots to see how things will work. That takes some time. We assess how that has gone, go after additional grants. Currently, Acton is the lead community. Doug Halley is formerly Board of Health. He's now specifically he's the transportation coordinator for this program.
Great,
Do
thank
you
you.
anticipate it will require much additional staff time to be involved?
A modest amount of staff time. We are currently already participating when we can, and so I would say out of the past 12 months, we've probably attended 9 or 10 meetings of the group.
So it shouldn't be a problem in regards to sort of that type of issue.
I don't believe so, and I think the benefits outweigh any potential problems with staffing.
Great.
I'm familiar with the Guaranteed Ride Home program through a Transportation Management Authority. How does that apply in this consortium? I see it mentioned here in the documents that, some of our businesses could provide it. Do they pay into this, or is our membership allowing the businesses to
The
participate?
businesses would have to participate as well in
That's
order to
another
guarantee
add-on.
that. That's an add-on. But I have been in preliminary conversations with Abundant Life Communities about how they might take advantage of this. And we're looking forward to having those conversations with Emerson Hospital.
Great.
Anybody in the public like to comment on this? We're,
Thanks, Marcia.
yeah.
Absolutely.
You ready for a motion?
Yeah, I move to sign the intermunicipal agreement for the provisions of the transportation management services and authorize the town manager to apply for membership in Crosstown Connect.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marcia.
Looking forward to this.
We are now ready to discuss the parking at Punkatassett Conservation Area. Dahlia, and, Jane did want me to sort of preface remarks tonight by saying that this is a discussion. We're not making any initial decision. In all likelihood, any decision regarding this will involve a town meeting. So nothing is kind of right away because there may well be funding issues. So that was my understanding of what I was supposed to communicate. But fire away.
Delia Kay, Natural Resources Director, and the last time I was here was on August 7th, where I presented the NRC's preferred option for parking at Punkatassett as the trailhead option. That would be 12 spaces that would be set off Monument Street, about 400 feet at the trailhead. And at that point, CPW was finalizing their evaluation of parking along Monument Street, which the neighbors had requested. And the Select Board asked the NRC for their input on that traffic evaluation. At their August 16th meeting, the NRC reviewed CPW's report, and they agreed that 4 parking spaces could be accommodated along Monument Street, but they did have concerns about this approach, and their concerns were as follows. The first was that it did not meet the recommendation from the Estabrook Woods Study Committee of providing 12 to 16 spaces at Punkatassett. Second was that formalizing parking could change the scenic character of Monument Street. They noted that the speeds along Monument are generally higher than the posted limits, which presents potential conflicts to bicyclists and pedestrians. U-turns in Monument Street would still be a hazard. There would be no safe way to turn cars around. And they raised a concern that the line of sight for cars exiting the trailhead parking might be compromised if there were cars parked at the entrance along Monument Street, and then the need for the physical barriers and enforcement of the parking limit would likely be needed to limit street parking to 4 cars. So those were the concerns that they had raised about that. And while the trailhead parking is, it's obviously the Apthorpe parcel would be the most preferred location for parking. That is not currently something that is available to the town to pursue. And so the NRC is still in a position where they believe that the trailhead parking presents the safest option for parking at Punkatassett.
The one essentially we looked at,
Essentially the one that I presented. I would like to work with the neighbors to see if we can sort of modify that so that it is as visible from the street as possible and also has as much screening to the residents as possible so that it is the best plan that we can put there.
my recollection of that involves sort of moving the parking to the right, a
Correct.
little bit more in line with the trail.
That's right.
And when do you think you have a sort of position that is the NRC going to take a position on what they would recommend to do, or?
Yeah, I mean, their position would be that the NRC, that the parking at Punkatassett, the best option that we have is to do
The one we've talked
12
about.
spaces at the trailhead. And that would include one handicap space.
They haven't formally done that yet.
They have.
Have.
They have, I mean, they reviewed the report at their August 16th meeting, and presented this feedback, and still maintain that the
That's
trailhead
still the
parking is the
preferred option.
preferred alternative. essentially, if the select board determines that 4 spaces should be accommodated along Monument Streets, the NRC would still be in a position of looking at creating additional parking at the trailhead. But instead of 12 spaces, it would be 8 spaces, so that the minimum number of the spaces recommended by the Estabrook Woods Committee would be accommodated.
Did they hold any public hearings on this?
They have held several discussions at their public meetings, but they have not held a public hearing specifically on this matter.
I know they've been fairly busy, so.
Yes.
And with the two, if you call them two options, 4 and 8 or 12, is there a preference there?
I would say that they had significant concerns with parking
On Monument Street,
Monument
as you
Street.
articulated, right?
So it seems that the better option would be to place the parking at the trailhead.
There were some concerns expressed about that option, though, right? The lack of visibility from the road, and that was the notion of moving it to the right a little bit.
And with the intent for the, if say the scheme that was 12 parking spaces, would that be closed or have this mechanical or physical barrier during, from dawn to dusk, it's open and then it's kind of sealed off?
We don't do that no.
At
that
at
wouldn't
any of
be-
the other places, so, okay.
Was there any discussion of, I think I recall somebody raising the issue of security cameras or some kind of
The police chief is not
monitoring?
in favor of having security cameras, but he said that they would add that to their regular patrol.
Patrol, so
I have a hunch that there may be some public comments on this, but thank you. And if there are anybody or is anybody who would like to make a comment, I don't know if we have to stand in line, but come up and identify yourself and make your comment.
nobody.
Please come forward. No, we'd prefer to, as I say, part of it is the recording aspect for CCTV and also just for everybody else.
Thank you. My name is Rich Churchill, and I live at 903 Monument Street. And I believe, as the Select Board is aware, you should have received a lot of comment from the neighborhood about the NRC plan. And it's safe to say that there is unanimous opposition to that plan. And I would also...
Among the neighbors you're talking, or the butters.
Butters and any neighbor on Monument Street that wished to participate in what we've referred to as the Punkatasset Study Group. And
When did this group, the neighborhood group, kind of form? Was it formed while because a process for the NRC was going on, or subsequent?
well, others can offer their own opinion. My feeling is that when the Estabrook Study Group, or whatever that committee is called, came out with their recommendation, the neighbors were very upset about that in many respects. One is that we weren't offered any participation in that committee, nor were we afforded a similar courtesy in terms of being able to have a study group that was specifically oriented to the concerns of the neighborhood on Monument Street. And so we felt that based upon a recommendation that we were not allowed to participate in that said 12-plus parking spaces should be constructed or allowed on Monument Street, we felt that we needed to consider that issue and all related issues associated with that. So it's been, it's an informal group,
Evolving, yeah.
and it has evolved. And we've had the opportunity to meet amongst ourselves as well as with town officials. We had a meeting with the Public Works Director and I guess a couple of assistant town engineers. And then, as Delia alluded to, there was a site meeting that included the police chief. I'm not going to repeat everything I said in my comments. My feeling is that I would hope that the select board would offer a forum where the neighborhood could express their concerns about the plan that was put on the table by the NRC, as well as having a full vetting of ideas that we have developed into a comprehensive plan that deals in a whole raft of issues that include, controlling speed on Monument Street, change through grading, changing the ability of cars to be further pushed off the road to improve the safety. So, again, that's my point. It's a significant enough issue that I think the neighborhood deserves an opportunity to really fully express themselves about what our concerns are and what our plan is, and to be able to have a reasonable debate. So far, it feels as if, there isn't a nice word for it, but it feels like this plan is being jammed down our throats without the input. And before attending this meeting, I had reviewed the tape of your August 7th hearing, and Delia referred to, as it actually, not with regard to this punkatacid issue, but with regard to the dog leash issue, her specific point was, or one of her comments was, there should be buy-in amongst the dog owners. And this neighborhood doesn't feel that there's been any attempt to get buy-in from us. So,
Thank you. Anybody else?
My name's Tim White. I'm 851 Monument Street, the abutter on the other side of Mr. Churchill. And I think he summarized that nicely, so I won't add on to that. But I would say part of this group has been several neighbors who are family members of some of the original donors, which has given us the ability and the access to look back through the deeding, the process of the gifting, some of the conservation restrictions, and have invested a fair amount of time, energy, and legal resources in understanding that. And I think it's going to be important before proceeding on this plan for the town to get up to speed on that and understand what it can and can't do. And we'd rather see that work done up front and in collaboration with us rather than have to get into a situation that can be more costly and less productive. In agreeing with Richard, I think more study and some ability to have dialogue around it will be important in the long run for all of us.
Do you have some material that we should see?
We did. I mean, it's all public record material in terms of the deeds and the conservation restrictions. But our experience has been thus far, many of the conversations around the use of the land and the ability to use the land it's been formed in committees, and it hasn't necessarily been any kind of. There's been a collaborative effort among the different groups that are speaking. The Estabrook Committee spent very little time looking at any of the issues there, and they solved a problem at Estabrook Road, which we have the same as the abutter. We have the same problem. We could argue scope and issue, but we deal with trespass and people walking into our house and people using our backyard as a bathroom, and we deal with that. However, that's not the issue at all. I think it's a much more complex issue in terms of this land use and the ability to use the land in different.
Is there something particular about the land use, though, that you kind of alluded to that we should be looking at that we're not aware of?
I think that when we deal with the conservation restriction and the easement, it is important to look at can the town allow the use of the easement to be changed from the current use?
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else like to make a comment? Please come forward.
My name is Joseph Rosado, and I'm a resident of 873R Monument Street. And I'd just like to add to some of the comments made by my neighbors, which is, as a renter on that property from the trustees of reservations for about 9 years, I was recently made aware, that I didn't realize the town had a right-of-way or ownership on that drive. And so I was concerned because when I found out from neighbors that these developments were taking place, there was no contact from any department of the town to notify us that we could be engaged in this process. I happened to find out because some neighbors and the trustees of reservations approached us, to let us know that at that time they were considering some sort of mutual agreement with the TTOR in the front field of our property. And when that didn't work out, there's no communication, to my awareness now, between the trustees of reservations, the NRC, or any other department in Concord over that particular parcel of land. And so as renters, we don't have we don't really have someone speaking for us about how these changes would impact our daily life. I have 2 small children that play in that area, and it's really concerning that there would be a change of use from having people and dogs walk down the path, which can sometimes be challenging, but we want to be neighborly. But to now have the consideration of vehicles traveling down that road constantly through the day, is very alarming. And as well as we don't have control over the structure there. We have an open garage that basically has a lot of valuable items that we consider valuable that are stored in there, and we can't close that off. We don't own the structure, and so things like this would just create greater risk, safety concerns. Not only for that, we also addressed concerns about the actual reasonable width of that lane in certain points, and we were answered by the NRC at meetings that it would be plenty wide once they cleared some trees and brush and stuff that's in the way. But we stand there every day and we see it and address that, it's not possible if you stand there with the eye test to have 2 cars going in 2 different directions. And so it would create a lot of log jams where vehicles wouldn't be able to get past one another. They'd be having to back out possibly. My wife and I currently are constantly in friendly negotiations, thankfully, with dog walkers, people with baby strollers, other vehicles, whether utility or neighbors, whatever or people that are even just turning around, or we have to pull into the field or out of the way. And we just don't see how it's possible, for cars to not be engaged in other public safety concerns on that roadway or on the access way if these changes were made. And there's been no study that we're aware of that has thought ahead proactively about concerns that may not exist now but would be a direct result of these changes. And the other concern we have is we've experienced in the time we've been there, the winters, and unfortunately, even if people are responsible now, that would cut down the width of the lane. It would create a opportunity for people to get stuck, and that's the only access way in or out for emergency vehicles or regular use. And the NRC has yet to provide no real solution or to really, in my estimation, acknowledge these as problems. They've been very optimistic, which is great, but, to have an optimistic attitude, but I feel like these are issues that need to be more largely considered. I don't know if...
They certainly should be addressed, I think. Whatever the answer is, people need to know. They're good questions, I think, that you're raising.
And I want to wrap up because someone else did mention that, the maintenance of that, particularly in the wintertime, opening, closing it, there's a lot of theory, but I actually brought photos and I plan to send a letter my wife's given of we've seen, comments were received that, it's not used after dark, but lots of people do. We've got, people who are building temporary dwellings back there, that we find tarps. I've been walking back there in mornings with my kids sometimes, probably half a dozen times, and seeing somebody getting up, and packing up their gear, their little hideaway. And I don't know, they're not there all the time, but, it's not patrolled. It's not, nobody's keeping track of that. And we've been told in response that it's up to the neighbors to, manage and watch over these kinds of issues and to report. And it just feels a very, less than desirable position to be put into. So, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ward Cheney, 873 Monument Street. And I'm also here for my wife, who is sick and cannot, overly tired at this time of the night, so she needs a rest. I'm going to speak for myself, but I found this process very frustrating, and I feel that a number of the people that I've dealt with in asking questions are less than forthcoming. And I feel that there are a lot of motivations, a bit kind of behind the scenes, that many of our the people, me in particular, but a lot of people who are involved in the neighborhood, just are not fully aware of. I think the goals of the selectmen are unclear to us, what the mandate is that you have given to the natural resources in terms of dealing with the parking. I don't fully understand why it's come up as an issue. I don't understand why there seems to be such a rush to get it solved. I would very much like it for our neighbors, the people that are concerned in the study group, to have a chance to sit with the selectmen and find out what it is that the selectmen, what the goals are of the selectmen. And I would like to know some of them, but I'd also like to know all of them. And it just strikes me in a town that moves with a lot of deliberation, that has a lot of history and a lot of people parking on that street for so many years, that all of a sudden this has become a huge issue that has to be moved along quickly. And I'm surprised that many of us don't know what the forces are that are pushing this decision. And I find that there's a number of letters you've received, I'm sure, that have detailed parking along the street, that at least to a lot of us who are not uneducated people, seem to make a lot of sense and can be, and the safety issues can be mitigated. There's, I know that my wife talked to a city planner, was notified of a 2016 ruling that suggested that parts of the road could be, the traffic could be, the speed could be reduced, and that would seem to me to be a sensible solution, moving cars farther away from the edge of the road. That seems a solution. I know for one that Rich Churchill very generously has offered some space in front of his house for cars to park there. I know that John Robbins has spent a lot of time trying to figure out, with the parameters that we have been told that CPW has been working under, and he has been able to come up with 12 parking spaces. And the discrepancy between the CPW's 4 parking spaces seems to me absolutely ridiculous. That given the fact that on any particular day, you can certainly get 12 and more cars, and us taking into account what CPW's concerns have been, we still managed to, with additional parking offered in terms of Rich Churchill's and Maria Churchill's in front of their place, it still seems to be very confusing to me why everybody is saying that that's just not an option, and why the parking in there, the off-road in the street, 400 feet off of Monument, is the preferred solution, particularly when so many neighbors are opposed to it.
Did you express your point of view to the NRC at an earlier time?
Yes. And I know a number of people here have, and
I would say that the number one goal, at least for me, is safety. So, I mean, if you're looking for kind of what the motivation, that would be what I would be focusing on.
well,
I'm sure everybody, I mean, when you kind of put it as if somehow the select board, is a, unified group and we agree on every aspect, we've kind of had this hidden agenda. That's not the case.
I think
Different
there's-
ones have been involved in various degrees. You're talking about this being a rush decision. I think it's been discussed from what I can see, at least a couple of years, if not longer.
in terms of a parking lot.
In terms of the issue of, yes. of
Well, the
parking.
issue, I know, and it's been
Yeah.
over at.
I think saying that it's kind of rushed and this is a hidden agenda, that I would just take exception to.
Well, I know you probably would.
Yeah.
I believe myself that there are other reasons behind, besides
Well,
safety.
we all have a right to believe what we want.
What are
Yeah,
they?
We can't make up our own facts.
I would, as I say, I think the best setting would be to have the neighbors.
Well, what are these reasons?
That's what I would like to know.
You said there were,
I said, I believe there are.
well, what are the ones you believe?
No, I said, I believe there are other ones out there. I don't know what they are. I would like to have the neighbors have an opportunity to meet with you all and find out, as you say, the different opinions about why this off-road parking should be made. I certainly think that there are some issues over on Estabrook Road that are pressuring this kind of a decision. But I personally would like to hear, more from the selectmen themselves. Excuse me, I'm on antihistamines, so I dry out a lot. At least the guidance they've given to Delia and the natural resources, I would like the neighbors to have a chance to hear more about that.
So maybe I can just offer one, procedural thing here. When we started looking at how we use, manage, and provide access to all of our conservation lands, but particularly around Estabrook Road and Punkatassett, we asked the town to start helping us vet all of the issues and see if we can come up. We had a study committee that looked at the Estabrook Road entrance to try and come up with alternatives. And I think we're at the point of looking at all of the alternatives and making a decision. All those meetings are public, and I'm sorry that you may not have received a specific invitation to a meeting. They are public, and it's hard to know what people are interested in, which of our many public meetings that you'd be interested in coming to. So I invite you to look at the town calendar and see if there's something that's happening that you're interested in meeting.
My wife and I have been to many of them.
So
And
it's
I know
not-
that many of the group have too.
So I'm glad to hear that people have opinions that are coming forward, and I'm hoping that in all of the meetings and hearings that have been held over the last
Thank
2
you.
years, that some of those ideas are incorporated into that array of solutions. And it's a really big conundrum, as you know. I mean, there, access from Estabrook Road is a big conundrum. We have people looking for access from almost any direction, and we're trying to mitigate. We're trying to find, how do we allow access to these public and private lands where people are allowing public access, knowing that people bring their dogs, how to control dogs, And then how to meet the expectations of neighbors who, you're right, there's been parking on Monument Street for years, 12 cars or more. We're aware of that. So we're trying to find the best alternative for now that helps to spread the interest in people wanting to spend time in the woods among the different entrance points. And this is one that's being forwarded today. And I hope it sounds like you've been to the NRC meetings, your voice has been heard. Are you asking for another meeting, a special meeting with the neighbors? That would be doable, if that's what you think would be helpful, if the ideas haven't been heard? I'm seeing a head shake, that meeting with neighbors on Monument Street is of interest, a special meeting with the neighbors.
Come forward, and yeah, please.
I'm Tim's wife, so I'll speak for myself, but as a resident of 851 Monument, I'm Abby White. So essentially, just to put it in perspective, the parking lot would go about a few feet behind our rear lot line and between where the brown Punkatassett sign is and our land. Accessed by an easement that is, as was stated before, around 400 feet long, and we've estimated in just our, we've been gathering some data. I'm out there daily, I would say at least 5 times, sort of observing the scene of people coming in and out, parking. I'm at the bus stop at least 3 times a day, so I have 3 kids that are in the Concord schools. So I have a pretty good handle on the last 2 years there, and also grew up in Concord and remember coming to Punkatassett as a kid frequently. So I've seen the change of use that's been somewhat organic, but also somewhat exacerbated by internet sites and such that have all been mentioned in, and I've been coming to the meetings since I personally caught wind of the Estabrook Road Access Committee study, and I'm not getting all those words in the right place, but that started to bleed into how could we use Monument Street to alleviate some of the strain on Estabrook Woods, is my interpretation of that. So it seems that we've had 2 issues collide, and one is this idea of the town charging the NRC with looking at access and how do we solve the issue of people wanting access into this gorgeous, beautiful, peaceful place that has been created by private land ownership, Harvard, the town, and other conservation groups. So there's that, and then there's the safety at Monument Street, which we've sort of bought into, so to speak, by buying the property at 851 2 years ago. A little bit of history. Our driveway, we, in our deed, have 2 driveway curb cuts, and originally there was one. Our driveway fed into the easement. We opted, because our lawyer recommended, or I should say advised us, that our driveway was not really legal. So when we did a construction project, we legalized it, so to speak, by what's the word I'm looking for? By putting into action the 2 curb cuts. In doing that, which I would consider any cars in front of those 2 curb cuts not really to be considered a parking space because they were in front of where we were supposed to be able to access Monument Street, it's been stated that a parking space was taken away. So in that count that was done, rough count done by the DPW, one of the assistant engineers came out in August of 2016, and there was a report written up with a rough estimate of parking spaces given to the Access Committee, Study Committee, that stated there were roughly 14 spaces. That was including these curb cuts, both curb cuts, because our driveway at the time went to the easement. So there's 2 spaces. So that number, in my opinion, based on it being both rough and being kind of a reaction to trying to solve a problem of lack of parking, not safety, at the time, was not an accurate number. And that's the number that's been being used throughout this process. And we can talk about other parking that's been created, creative parking by the public that is half in the road. And does that really constitute a parking space? As was stated by Ms. Kaufman, there have been up to, say, 12 people at times parked there. In our observations as neighbors, and John Robbins has been collecting data that we've all been putting together, that parking most often is between 0 and 5 cars during the week. At peak times, and I'm giving you numbers, he has better statistics than me, but at peak times, that can get up to 10, 11, 12 cars. That's on beautiful October weekend days, maybe in the spring on a beautiful weekend day, but it's not regular use. And as I mentioned, the use has increased over time. And I think we can all agree that people are more and more going to these points and creating an issue where we need to look at access. So I make that point. I'll move on really quickly because every other point that was made, I can, agree with. I wonder about funding, because it's not just what has been quoted as about $50,000 to create the parking lot, but also ongoing funding to maintain that easement, whether it's plowing, keeping it so that it's safe, creating a barrier between the neighbors and the easement as the access is used up to over 100 times a day, if you count that repeated. So when I say 12 cars, that's 12 cars that turn over within the hour. So if you multiply that throughout the day, we're talking about the potential for 100 cars. And we're also talking about cars that get in and don't realize there's already 12 spaces being used as the word gets out that there's a lovely new parking lot behind 851 Monument Street. There could be 12 cars back there. It is well off the road. You wouldn't know that until you got within 100 feet of it. That's 300 feet in, and you're stuck. And with snow, you're even more stuck. So I think those things need to be looked at. Like I said, the funding, and I question not the process, because I can appreciate the town process, but could we look at these as two separate issues, safety on Monument Street and parking and access? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? I don't want to cut anybody off, but unless there's a new point to be made. I do want to say there were a number of very thoughtful letters that we've received, and I thank you all for your comments tonight. There isn't going to be a decision. This is a discussion tonight. And we'll certainly, Jane was one of the liaisons really to this whole issue, so we'll certainly give her the feedback, and she's the chair, so she'll tell us how we're going to proceed. But thank you all. You want to, if you come up before, thank you.
I did already have a chance to speak, but again, for the record, Joe Rosato at 873R Monument Street. As you can tell, it's a pretty muddy issue. There are a lot of factors involved, not just
Yes.
with the parking situation, but they're very connected for some people, not all.
Well, we're talking not only about
to
the safety of
Punkatassett
people on
Woods and
Monument
things,
Street,
yeah.
we're talking about the safety of the children of the neighbors
and the use of
all
the
rest, yeah.
land and other things. And so to really try to make a decision based on only one of those perspectives would seem rather unreasonable. And I think you would agree with that. So in the desire to help, I think we all want to help come up with a viable solution. We don't want to just say, no change in the parking. I think there's lots of people, even that aren't here, that have invested interest in one or any number of these issues. And so I would just ask that the select board, whether it's just through another meeting or a special meeting or something, consider how can we come together to address these things, to identify the process for moving forward, as opposed to just scheduling another meeting to make a decision.
No, and I think that is the spirit of what I've heard tonight, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Possibly on site, it's very helpful to see it.
Thank you.
So,
Delia has a comment.
Could I just respond to a couple of the comments
Yes,
that were raised?
please.
So I apologize to Mr. Rosato. I wasn't aware that there were two families who lived in that home. I had reached out to the Whites and to Ward and Nora as the direct abutters, and also the Churchills, to let them know that we were developing this plan early in the process, and let them know about the meetings that the NRC was holding on those. There was a point that was raised that it's not possible to have two vehicles on that piece of land at the entranceway. It is 28 to 50 feet wide, which would accommodate two vehicles. There would have to be some tree and shrub removal to accommodate that, but that has been evaluated and looked at by engineers, and that would be possible. Same with the snow plowing. It's probably easier to do snow plowing at a parking lot than it is to have it along the side of the road. But that has been something. So currently trustees plows to the entrance of the 873 Monument Street to the Apthorpe House, and then the town would need to take care of plowing the parking lot itself. So those have been questions that the NRC has evaluated. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you very
so
much. Public access to open space policy discussions be continued.
Be continued. I've been working on this and made some adjustments to it by including a definition of open space based on Massachusetts general law, which I think was helpful in clarifying what we meant by that. There were some concerns raised about the language in the draft was town-owned or controlled land, open space land. And there were some issues raised by organizations and individuals about the word controlled. And I had then spoken with, or let the petitioners from last year's town meeting know about that. They believed that removing that word was really contrary to what the intent of it was. So I've written to the town manager for assistance, and I'm searching for another way to define that. The NRC, Delia's not here any longer, but the NRC, I believe, is going to talk about it at their meeting on Wednesday night, which I plan to attend. So I think waiting until we have their input,
Yes.
hopefully we can find some language that meets the concerns of those that expressed it and also the intent of the petitioners. So still working on it. Hopefully I'll have something for you on the 30th.
Sounds good. Thank you for taking the
Finalized
initiative.
board comments for Envision Concord and the update. I don't know if Jane was going to be leading that, but I know that you're the person in
I
charge.
can stand in. At our last meeting, the select board charged the chair, or me, together with the chair, to prepare a select board response to the 4 questions that are posed by the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee. So you should have all received a copy to look at. And I was hoping that we could agree to the essence of what I tried to do is synthesize our last conversation at the board and put it all into a succinct response to the Comprehensive Long Range Plan Committee. I received some comments and they are incorporated. Unfortunately, I didn't get Mike's comments, although he prepared them. Some were substantive. One, we overlooked an important committee that we should be mentioning. The P3 committee probably should go into our.
Yes, I had some editorial suggestions, which were just, I think, really editorial. One substantive one about including a committee in the last paragraph of Alice's work, which I think is fine. And then just some elaboration, if you will, on the second to the last paragraph, talking about the issues of affecting the downtown and making it clear that it was striking the balance between issues such as sustainability, retail vitality, diversity. That was the real challenge that we faced. But substantively, Alice, I think, did a great job
Yeah.
of getting our comments organized, and I would certainly be in favor of authorizing the chair to move this forward substantially as written.
I would agree. I would just point out, vis-a-vis the last discussion we had, that the statement on the second page, the select board's interested in engagement with all residents in our community. This requires ongoing efforts to reach residents wherever and through what medium they follow. Engagement is a dialogue, not a static one-way communications. And I think we are, as a board, trying to make every effort. It's not an easy thing because people don't necessarily always look at the town website and see when meetings are. Delia did reach out and try to get some of the people and wasn't aware of everybody. So, it's obviously something we can do better, and we'll keep at it. But I think it is important that was one of the points that we're communicating to them.
Yeah, I like the fact that Alice is emphasizing engagement.
Yeah.
Mentions a millennial in the description, so that's good. But I really I like what you wrote.
Well, I'd move to authorize the chair to sign and transmit a comment letter to the Long Range Planning Committee substantially as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll work on the final draft with your comments and others.
Thank you. We're now at the public comments section, so if anybody has a comment, please come forward and make it. If not, we are ready for the committee liaison reports. Mike, you want to?
Sure. I attended the Hugh Cargill Trust committee meeting last week. They're very engaged in looking at available funds that they have and trying to make good judgments about that and trying to understand how they will deal with the long-run situation, given the change in the trustees of town donation allocation that would be coming to them.
They had come before the board
had come
indicating
before the
that their
board, and
funds
they
are
have-
not adequate for what the need is.
Yeah.
They had also, I think, I don't recall whether they met with the Long Range Planning Committee or whether they transmitted a letter to the Long Range Planning Committee, but outlining essentially the issues that articulated. They're also working on the silent fund in particular and putting together a more detailed process-oriented notion. You might recall it was moving the silent fund from a joint relationship between the trustees, between the board and the church into the jurisdiction of the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee. So I think some progress there. I attended the Long Range Planning, the Concord Municipal Light Plant meeting on Wednesday. Very thoughtful sort of meeting about a number of issues, the strategic plan, the long-range plan of the town, getting prepared to go have rate hearings, which will come at the end of the year, along with more substantive discussion of the strategic plan. So I think progress being made there, and people were pretty excited about it, and there's a lot of citizen participation. You attended as well. So it was a good meeting. And this morning I met with the Financial Audit Advisory Committee. And our task this morning was to review the management letter for the Concord Carlisle Regional School District, which we did. We had a number of questions about that, which were satisfactorily answered by the auditors. And I was authorized as the chair to prepare a memorandum to the school committee, which I will do and will be hopefully approved at our next meeting, and then I will transmit it to the school district. We also scheduled tentative dates for our next two meetings, at which we will take up the audit of the light plant. And then in our December meeting, hopefully we'll see the town audit report, which they are here this week, I think, doing the actual on-the-ground auditing. We anticipate no particular issues. I think with the town one, it's always been a very clean audit. And the same was true of the light plant. It was their expectation is there's no substantial issues there. So good meeting, and then we will have two more meetings to round out the schedule for this current audit cycle.
Alice?
Let's see, I attended the planning board. We heard from the town manager that the umbrella project was approved both by the planning board and the ZBA. Of interest is that there will be an MOU signed between the town and the library, so that there would be no overlap on the scheduling of events that would cause a parking constriction, a parking problem. So they already have ongoing collaboration, but they'll formalize that in an MOU. There was discussion of the implementation of the tree preservation bylaw, which is fairly new, it was adopted at town meeting last year. It was ruled that a general bylaw is not a cause to delay a building permit, but we're still not, we don't have the rules and regs yet prepared for the bylaw, so we're asking for probably some advice on whether the bylaw is in effect or is it held. We don't know. There's a discussion. We'll have to figure out whether there's a waiting period until the bylaw has the rules and regs. Number of zoning changes we can expect at town meeting this year. Historical Commission also met, and probably in the next week or so, we'll be announcing the new open invitations for the Preservation Awards. Last year was our first year. The award ceremony was held at one of our select board meetings. This year it'll be held off-site, I think at the Concord Library, most likely. And so when the application period begins, it'll be a notice in the paper, and we'll probably get it out on our Facebook and Twitter so that people can find architects who have projects or homeowners who have projects can offer theirs for potential award. I just came back from the Minuteman School Building Committee. At last, we have a permit for the foundation. This has been a very difficult negotiation, getting the permits required from Lincoln to allow the project to go forward. And some of it's a philosophical question. I'm sure Steve understands it better than I do. The project, under state law, you can apply for and receive a full building permit. And Lincoln has not felt comfortable with that and wanted to be able to permit each individual aspect of the project. So we had to get the foundation permit, but we were planning on submitting a whole building project with the 90% drawings and then the 100% drawings. It set back the time a bit, cost a great deal of, there are significant financial investments that have been made to meet the Lincoln Board's questions in the process. I think we'll get back on track. The 90% drawings are done, 100% probably in about another 3 weeks. So the concrete is being poured. You can go and take a look at it. Rebar's been laid, concrete's in. The goal is to get all the concrete work done before winter comes tonight.
Is it because
at 35 degrees or whatever it is.
Is it because Lincoln Building Department staff isn't large enough to kind of digest the entire package at one time?
They've never done that. And that
Right.
even though state law allows it and even supports the idea that that's a better way to go than getting individual permits,
Absolutely.
they didn't feel comfortable with that
Yeah,
process.
because usually a developer would start with small incremental steps and move through it, but I guess it's probably just smaller packages for them to review.
Except that when they were looking at the review for the foundation permit, they came back with 300 questions that needed to be addressed, that were all addressed in the 90 and to be addressed in the 100% design drawings. So it set,
And
changed the
they're
process.
letting the school stay with the 8th edition of the building code?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So it's always interesting to go to these meetings. The last of the final blast was on September 21st. And the next step is, and the neighbors were fine at the end of all the conversations, no major impacts, at least not noted for now. As Mike mentioned, I was with him at the CMLP meeting. The members of the Energy Futures Task Force are meeting with the Acton Green Energy Committee. They were invited to talk about the Concord process because they are looking to be net zero or something close to that. So we are being looked upon by our neighbors as leaders, which is nice to see. And I think that's it.
I had the pleasure of attending the second Affordable Housing Funding Committee meeting last week. We welcomed our fifth member, Elizabeth Eldon, who expertise lies in real estate and also planning board and ex officio. We had FinCom representatives Linda Miller and Mary Hartman attending. Charles Phillips came and presented his information on Article 49, which was interesting. I think the board really dug into his concerns and his thinking, and they had some views, opinions about his approach, if we're targeting, say, a specific group or a certain demographic. Also, the questions, similar questions to what happened during the FAR zoning changes about what square footage is the official, what's the 3,000 square foot include. Some of those issues were raised. And I think that helped clarify for them some possible other ways of doing that. We also had the pleasure of having Finance Director Kerry LaFleur join us as well and provide the group kind of a primer, is that the way you say that? Primer on town finance. And I think that really helped the group understand how revenue is collected, managed, and how it's kept in, using town meeting as an annual.
Also, how to achieve the AAA bond rating.
Exactly. So there were.
Critical.
She explained all the factors that balance out how the town can keep that AAA rating. She provided everyone information on, amounts of unused property levy, as well as different vehicles that they could pursue in terms of what's a stabilization fund, a revolving fund. If you collect fees that you generate or create new fees, it requires special legislation. So if you go with revolving fund idea or a tax increase, it would be need to be approved every year at town meeting. And if you went with a fee collection, you would have to take the risk with state legislation having to approve that. So I think that enlightened them quite a bit on what options they had in front of them. And what was interesting with having Elizabeth there, that she started providing or also offering assistance in giving everyone data on real estate, housing costs, values. And I think at the end of the meeting, there was some public comment about, more questions about how the revenue, whichever way it's collected, approved by town meeting, how's it focused? What's it focused on? What's the mechanism to manage that? So I think there's some easy decisions up front, and then really the process of how the revenue would be managed, and by whom and how does the town stay involved. So I think they're getting
That's
a
good.
good feel
That's
of
good.
the weight of
Yeah.
what they signed up
Not
for.
quite a great idea. Sometimes seem simpler than trying to get them.
Yeah, I'm
accomplished.
feeling good though. I think
Good.
we'll be able to kind of
Yeah.
have a revenue process selected, and then really I think the work was going to be about the process on how that revenue is managed and how the town can feel it's spent properly.
Right.
That's good, good start, thanks.
Yeah, off to a flying start.
Right. The school committee met with the finance committee, and they went through kind of, I think, to give an understanding of sort of how budgets were developed by the school committee, but how fluid sometimes they are because of special ed and other issues that come before that the school will have to deal with, but don't always know how it's going to work, and how, particularly with the high school, the proportion of Carlisle versus Concord, the ratio and how that affects the budget issues. And it was a very informational issue. I think we're almost, this could be the miscellaneous correspondence, but there was the letter regarding the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail, which I think you answered very well. But the issue with that is that's not going to be completed probably until 2019.
Spring.
And the question comes up about what usage can be made of the trail and liability issues regarding when work is being done on the trail. The workmen don't want, the contractor doesn't want people using it because there's a risk of injury and harm. And it's tough to get the message out on that, and kind of what is the obligation of the town regarding that. So those were kind of the, the two committees that I was involved with. Miscellaneous correspondence, I don't know if anybody got anything particular. They said there was the one, I believe, directed to you, but we got copies of it. If anybody else had any?
Well, we heard a lot from the folks
Yeah.
at Punktastic. We got a lot of communications from folks.
Yeah, there were a lot of letters, and I thought that the spirit of those letters were what I was very pleased, because I think it was trying to, it wasn't kind of just complaining, it was trying to reach an accommodation that's going to be appropriate, and providing information which it wasn't an issue I'd been tremendously involved with, but it was information that I think needed to be raised and we need to address. So I appreciated those letters very much.
Yeah, I agree.
You can come.
Well, we're ready, I guess, for nominations.
Let's see. Sorry, guys, I lost all my paper.
Trying to see where mine, I could pass
Want me
it
to do
on.
it?
Yeah, you,
Yeah, why don't you? I lost mine.
Any nomination to nominate James Burns of 1515 Main Street to Concord Housing Development Corporation for a term to expire May 31st, 2020.
second. Oh, we don't have to
Don't
do
need to
that.
do it. Committee appointments,
No, we don't need it on
I guess we don't, that's
nominations.
right, just the
committee appointments,
nominations,
Laura
and then we get the
Benessi
appointment.
of 558 Bedford Street to the Youth Advisory Board for a term to expire May 31st, 2020.
Second.
Second.
And I will make a commercial announcement that we are still short pollinator committee members. We really need to get this committee going. We have 3 members. But we're still short a couple members, and I hope folks will sign up.
The Dog Park Feasibility Study Committee, we do have a number of green cards, and we're processing those. We don't have names tonight, but I think the next meeting will probably have a full slate, so.
Right. And I move to appoint election officers per the town clerk memo received October 16, 2017.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I thought that was an interesting group of, I think they listed the various voters and the party affiliations, and one of the people was a member of the Pizza Party.
My fault.
There was some
Somehow
very
I missed that
interesting,
one.
could sign up
single
for it.
individual parties that I had not been aware existed before.
I somehow missed that.
It's a party.
You ready for,
I think we need to now adjourn.
move to
for
adjourn to executive session for the purposes of discussing employee contracts, land acquisition, and litigation, and not to reconvene in open session.
We
The
do that
executive session
individually.
is
Second.
needed to protect strategy discussion affecting litigation on stated matter.
Second.
Your vote?
Aye.
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 Aye. So,